Is it basketball season yet? Getting all this news about the schedule, who's coming in, who's coming back, and yet we're still months away from the start of a Duke basketball season. Enjoy it, folks. It'll be here before you know it.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man. The Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So great to have you here with us today on this Tuesday, May 19th, 2026. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics. And on today's show, we're going to continue to focus on the schedule that Jon Scheyer and Duke putting together for the upcoming basketball season. We'll have this conversation with our pal Jeff Fedotin from Forbes. Get into a little bit later in the program, we'll talk about still a need for an assistant coach for the Blue Devils, as no news has been shared on that front. What could be the latest there, and so much more that we'll get into throughout the course of today's show. But we start once again with the headline news. Duke has added a home-and-home date with the Illinois Fighting Illini. As Jeff Fedotin joins us now, this is news, Jeff, that you and I were not able to react to last week on the program, but now getting a chance to break it all down. What an exciting opportunity to go up against yet another Final Four team from a season ago. Hope you're doing well, man. Welcome into the show.
Doing well, JJ. Always a blast being on here with you. And yeah, what exciting scheduling news for so many reasons. I mean, this could mean there's some question a little bit about the Amazon game versus Michigan now that the Big Ten is taking umbrage with Michigan being on an Amazon game. But if the schedule is now as it stands, Duke would play 3 of the Final Four teams from last year. Talk about a difficult schedule there, and what fun it will be going against some of these powerhouses. And we'll dive a little bit more into why Illinois is really become and they've always been a strong program, but Underwood's really built them into something of late.
Yeah, I mean, you could go back 20 years ago when you're thinking about Illinois basketball,
Right.
and certainly the 2005 final when they're taking on the North Carolina Tar Heels. Illinois a chance to win a national championship, and ultimately Raymond Felton, Sean May, those guys for North Carolina basketball able to get it done. And here we are 2 decades later.
We were all rooting for Illinois that day.
I know. 2 decades later, it's a new coach, it's a new program in some ways. And here they are finding sustained success with Brad Underwood. You think about all the coaching wins charts that are there, and Jon Scheyer, as he's going through year by year, Brad Underwood is a name that had been up there, equally like Brad Stevens and what he had done at Butler to start his coaching career. But Brad Underwood has really built a very impressive program.
He absolutely has. I mean, what Scheyer has done, he's gone to 3 straight Elite Eights, which is incredible. Well, Illinois has reached at least the Elite Eight in 2 out of the last 3 years. So really, 2 programs that are really firing on all cylinders. This is cool for so many reasons, not just facing a really good team, but the connections. Illinois is Scheyer's hometown state, and Champaign. I'm actually in Chicago, and Champaign is about a 2.5-hour drive from Chicago. So it's not like a Chicago school, although there are, many Illinois alums in the Chicago area. But Scheyer loved Duke, and I think when he chose to go to Duke, I think it was Duke all the way, and not as close as some others would have made it known. And part of the reason was actually Scheyer's high school coach was the brother of Bruce Weber, then the Illinois head coach. So I think they wanted that recruiting to seem a little closer than it was, but it's still cool that Jon Scheyer is going to face one of his finalists here. Yeah. And the Duke Illinois history has been really interesting of late. They've played some crazy games. In the Cooper Flagg year, Duke obliterated them in Madison Square Garden. Well, then they also do. This is a home and home. There was a mini home game. Do you want to call it that? During the COVID year, Illinois played at Duke, but there were no fans. That was a Duke team that was really young. There's so many what ifs about that team. If the freshmen had more time to really grow and more practice time that they couldn't have because of the COVID restrictions, I think that was actually a better team. But that wasn't one of the great Duke teams, and Illinois handed it to pretty well but it'll be fun for Illinois to actually have the experience of really being in Cameron with fans there. So a lot of juicy storylines for this game, JJ.
Yeah, good on you, man, because I'd kind of forgotten about that COVID year matchup, and yet there have been so many impressive games throughout the course of the history of these two schools. I was sitting here thinking about Jon Scheyer himself and the recruitment that takes place, and like you said, his Illinois roots that are there, the connection to Duke, notably that he had was playing at Glenbrook North High School, the same high school as Chris Collins, who was Duke's associate at that time. So that's kind of an indoor. He had two schools that thought, oh, we're for sure going to be able to land his services to play here. And yeah, ultimately it was Duke that got him here. And now he's leading the program himself and off to a really impressive start there. So I'm excited the fact that it is a home and home, yet another impressive marquee game inside Cameron Indoor this season. And it's a team that's bringing back so many talented players. Their front court is going to be massive once again. When you think about Illinois, not only have you seen success, but Jeff, I'll remind people that over the last 3 seasons, when Duke has been the tallest team in America or the second tallest team in America, it's been Illinois who's been right next to them as a fellow super massive team with all of their starters and no scholarship players really under that 6'4", 6'5" range. They're also huge.
Yeah, that's a great point, JJ, that they're straight out of the Scheyer playbook, that they have been one of the bigger teams in Division I the last couple years. And they should be again. As you said, they retain Moser. They lose Wagler, who's going to be a lottery pick for sure. Was another, again, size was so he was kind of their de facto point guard, he and Boswell, and he was 6'5", 6'6". Stojakovic, we'll see if he comes back or not, but another big player. But yes, this is going to be another big team. So what great experience that will be to go against the size. Somebody who can literally and figuratively look Duke in the eye. So.
Yeah, the schedule is starting to take more of a shape, and that's really exciting to think about when you look at what Duke has going into this upcoming season in terms of a non-conference schedule. So we'll start to look at that and a little bit more when Locked On Blue Devils continues here in a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here and every possession matters. If you're looking to get even closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right. Turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets just for getting started. I like using FanDuel during the playoffs because everything I need is right here, all in one place. The app is so easy to navigate. Saw an amazing game 1 of the Western Conference Finals last night between the Thunder and the Spurs, going all the way to double overtime. Tonight, game 1 of the Eastern Finals between the Knicks and the Cavaliers. New York favored by 7.5 over at FanDuel. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. The best place to be, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, we move forward on the program today. My name is JJ Jackson. I've got my buddy Jeff Fedotin from Forbes with me on the show. We're talking about the Duke season and some of these schedule games that the Blue Devils have. Now, as we take a look at this non-conference schedule, Jeff, it's really interesting to start to gather some thoughts to the overall makeup of this. 14 non-conference schedules for Duke, or games, I should say, for Duke this year. 18 games within the ACC, a grand total of 32. We know about 8 of them. So 6 games kind of left to go as we're filling out the board. Last year, we saw an even split between 7 high major opponents and then 7 mid-major and, lesser competition that they saw on the schedule there. If that remains true, there could be one more major game pending, which is kind of crazy to even think about.
Absolutely. But as it stands, what a daunting schedule, what a fun schedule it's going to be to go against all these great teams. Like we said, it looks right now like it's going to be 3 of the 4 Final Four participants from last year, including the champions, including the 2 teams in the championship game. And I think this is so smart of Jon Scheyer. The ACC was better last year, but it still wasn't good. We saw that play out in the tournament when Duke was far and away the team that lasted the longest. And I think Louisville's going to be really good with all they've invested in the transfer portal. I think that's going to be a formidable opponent. But you look around, Carolina's a big question mark with their new head coach. looking at their talent, they look, Duke Carolina's always tough, but they look just okay. I think Virginia is going to be down a little bit from where they were. They're going to be good. I think Syracuse is going to be better with their new coach, but the ACC is still not, what it was when we're in 2019 and you have 3 number 1 seeds. So I think it's really smart of Jon Scheyer to challenge his team in the non-conference so much to compensate a little bit for the ACC, which is still a little bit down.
Yeah, and you look at the games, talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show, but we'll dive back in. I mean, when you see the dates that these games are being played, once again, it's very early in the year that you're going to go toe-to-toe with somebody when you're talking about November 10th, the second week of the season, already a trip up to Chicago, where you're at, Jeff, where Duke's going to be taking on Michigan State in the Champions Classic. A week later, you're taking on Illinois back in Cameron Indoor. The very next week is Thanksgiving week, and UConn's on the schedule. The very next week is the ACC SEC Challenge. I mean, it is a long run of premier non-conference games. And then, like I mentioned, there are going to be other games kind of baked within this, including there could be another really strong test that Duke adds to the slate.
Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned the timing of this. I mean, that you go from Michigan State, Illinois to UConn. I mean, when your team is just starting off, what a daunting slate and how fun that's going to be. JJ, I think it's going to be interesting to see that December slate you have up there with, the Michigan game on the 21st. This past season was an amazing season, but they had a little bit of a dip around the Christmas break. But that's when they lost to Texas Tech. They had probably, I think, their worst game of the season, although Duke won against Lipscomb. They just did not look good. We're trailing for much of the first half. So I'm curious how they do this year against in that same time period. I'm sure
you're right, because
be very cognizant of that.
Starting ACC play, then you had Georgia Tech at Florida State, and that's when there were so many concerns kind of about the defensive effort that was there. And this, of course, is during the holiday breaks, the start of a new semester academically as you're turning the counter and going into a new year and all the things. Just not as many games. I mean, this will be a stretch where you're going 8 or 9, 10 days, with no game on the schedule for Duke. It's a balancing practice time, a chance for the guys to fly back home and be with their family. So we'll certainly see as those things start to be put together on the schedule what it looks like.
Right. Yeah, that's a whole, like you said, the challenge of not only the distraction of the holidays, but a little bit of rust. I think that impacted the Duke team last year during that Christmas break. And it's funny, too, as we're talking about, this is their worst stretch and their lull. They lost all of like one game during that stretch. So they were really just awful, right? Yeah, we'll do the same thing, man. If it's the same deal coming up this season, I will take just 1 or 2 losses for what would be a very competitive season. All right, looking at it though, right now we've got Coastal Carolina on November 5th. That is a team that finished 247 in KenPom this season, so barely a top 50 team in the sport. Again, 365 Division I teams in college basketball this past season. We'll see if any other team gets the bump up going into the new year. So not the most notable competition for Duke there to open up the year on November 5th. But also, as we discussed on yesterday's program, Jeff, the season starts Monday, November 2nd and Tuesday, November 3rd. Every team in America pretty much plays their first game on that day. As college basketball and the NCAA really loves to get you started. Duke has done it every single year under Coach Scheyer. They've started on that Monday or Tuesday. So in all likelihood, there will be another game added even before the Coastal Carolina game. So there could be 1 or 2 games before you get into a high major opponent in Michigan State, or the big game, the marquee game that we're waiting on adding could be like last season when Duke's very first game of the year was in Charlotte, North Carolina, when they took on the Texas Longhorns. Yeah, you pointed out, JJ, when you had Kevin Connolly on the show, great point that Texas game, in that Texas game of last year, they were a play-in team, but they made it to the Sweet 16. They barely lost to Purdue in the Final 8. Yeah. So that was a good veteran team.
They figured it out down the stretch for sure.
They absolutely did. So what a test that was for the opening game. But you made the point that was kind of the outlier in the Jon Scheyer tenure so far, that they Duke hasn't typically opened up with that kind of opponent. They've eased in a little bit more. That's kind of just on a hunch what I'm expecting, but very curious to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, and then obviously we'll see a game against Army is the other kind of known non-conference opponent that is out there for Duke. This was a 3-year deal. Obviously, they've played them tons of times in the history of both these programs, but the latest agreement was 3 years at Duke in 2024, at Army in 2025, a return trip for Army to Durham in 2026. That date is just not known at the time, so there's a rundown there. I shared this on social media on Monday evening and then got replies about SIU Edwardsville. Apparently at a recent promoting event from their school is starting to auction off tickets to a Duke basketball game. And I found that interesting. So we'll look to continue to confirm that, Jeff, but SIU Edwardsville could be another opponent that Duke's got on the schedule.
The Duke is loading up on those Illinois opponents, right? Illinois and now SIU. That's really interesting, JJ. That could be another one of those. And you mentioned Army. So cool that Duke has this series with Army for so many reasons, but also, I mean, it all goes back to Coach K and how he obviously played there, he coached there. So it's so cool that they can keep that connection between the schools. I love that that Duke is doing that.
Yeah, I got this note from J-Man as well, thinking about the SIUE head coach, Brian Barone. Currently, his father, Tony, played at Duke from 1965 to 1968, and then went on to be an assistant coach for the Blue Devils from 72 to 74. So in essence, it really does make sense for this to be an opponent that's there. But that connection, that's a pre-Coach K basketball connection, which anytime that happens, you got to absolutely love it, because we're talking about a man who spent over 4 decades as the head coach leading the Duke basketball team.
Yeah, and he was, Tony Barone was a big-time coach. I'm trying to remember. I think he was he might have been coach of the Grizzlies for a little bit, and he was a coach of Texas A&M. So
Grizzlies. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So his father was a big-time coach. So it's cool. I didn't realize that's what his son was doing. So that will make that matchup pretty fun there.
Yeah. How about Tony Barone, a part of the Duke family? And absolutely exciting to see SIU Edwardsville potentially back on the schedule for Duke this upcoming basketball season. All right, we've got a few more things that we want to touch on as we start to wind down this episode of Locked On Blue Devils. We'll do that in just a moment. Guys, thank you so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen and your first watch here today. For your second listen, make sure that you go check out Locked On College Basketball. Isaac Shade and Andy Patton do a great job keeping you up to date on everything happening in the wide world of college hoops. Also, check out Locked On ACC. Always important to know what's going on within our conference itself. So Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs give you everything you need to know. Also, give yourself an opportunity to check out the Everydayer Club. You can get Locked On Blue Devils ad-free with the Everydayer Club, plus members-only Discord access. Join right now at lockedonbluedevils.supercast.com. Again, it's the Everydayer Club. Go check it out here with us at Locked On Blue Devils. All right, moving forward on the program here today, JJ Jackson with my buddy Jeff Fedotin from Forbes. We're talking about Duke hoops. And on today's show, Jeff, we've talked about Illinois, the most recent team added to Duke's home non-conference schedule. And then we want to talk a little bit about some other things around the program. We saw this past weekend a heavy recruiting weekend for Jon Scheyer, hanging out at Nike EYBL in Memphis with Tyler Thornton there beside him and watching some of the top prospects. Excited to have Brandon Jenkins, a National Recruiting Insider, back on the program here again this week and get the latest there. But in regards to his coaching staff, Jon Scheyer still has an opening with Evan Brads returning to take the Belmont head coaching job.
Absolutely. That's kind of the last shoe to drop. We're talking some schedule news we're waiting for. We're obviously waiting to see whether Blackwell does come to Duke or remain in the NBA draft. But yeah, the coaching, that's kind of the last, that coaching vacancy is the last shoe to drop. And just one more note, JJ, you mentioned how Coach Scheyer and Coach Thornton were there. Also, it was cool to see on social media that Paulo Banchero was there for some of it. Talk about a nice recruiting pitch. Just, hey, we're right next to the rookie of the year, the number 1 overall pick of the draft. You want some of this? Who wouldn't want to be part of that? So
yeah, it's been such a flex because in the summertime, Jason Tatum is known to go to some of these big events and really support the next generation of basketball players coming up. And he's always sitting right there beside Jon Scheyer. And now, Paulo's hanging out with him, another premier player. It's amazing that that's who you can kind of point to. It's always been in the pitch, but now you can actually point to these people to what could be taking place there. So, nice observation by you, because really excited to see what this recruiting class building and coming forward will be once Jon Scheyer kind of gets his coaching staff fully in place going into a new season. And I would expect here pretty soon we'll get some news on that front. Still open to the idea, it seems, that it could be an outside hire, not within the Duke family, but it's been working out the last couple of times. Maybe dipping your toe back into the NBA level, getting more of those player development specialists to come and be more integrated into your coaching staff. So really, again, excited to see what Jon Scheyer does with that move.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because Coach Brad was only there a year, but a very valuable. We saw how a big a part of he was in the play calling and in the huddles. And Jon Scheyer has spoken about how important he was. So if Duke goes that model, kind of an NBA guy without connections to Duke, or stays within the family. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And, the assistant coach, those positions are so interesting that Jon Scheyer, he's been at the school, he's been a head coach at Duke for such a short time, but already has this nice coaching pipeline. You look at guys who are, guys like Jay Lucas, who's done such a good job in Miami, could be onto a bigger job, like a Kentucky job soon. So that's why it's so important to look at these assistant coaches. They're not only going to be important at Duke, but also could be have their own coaching jobs in a short time period here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we'll see how that all comes to be for Jon Scheyer as he builds out the staff. And then also when you look at this schedule coming up in the next 8 days, we will reach the deadline for college players to say if I'm going to stay in the NBA draft process or return to the NCAA. And John Blackwell is kind of the one guy that we're still kind of waiting on a little bit of news. K Academy will start next week. He told Kevin Conley and others last week at the Combine in Chicago that he intends to be at K Academy. If that's the case, you would think this guy is going to be coming back to play basketball, but it'll officially be nice to see that, and we can put to bed the thought of him being a part of this 2026 NBA draft class.
How about that bombshell that Kevin Conley dropped on this podcast? Yeah. His roommate, John Blackwell's roommate last year at the testing.
What a coincidence.
With Cedric Coward. Can we, in the future, can Jon Scheyer make sure the hotel that's right near the Wintrust Arena, just that room, that we just don't put any Duke prospects in there? There's some bad mojo in that room.
Yeah, so we don't have to wait for news.
So we don't have to stress over it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, but I think we're both in agreement that we think Blackwell will kind of end up coming back to the team for this season.
I do think it's going to be a different result from Coward. Blackwell has played really well during the scrimmages. But again, it just seems like it's so much. It was 100% in Coward's best interest. He had to go in the draft. I mean, he was a lottery pick, and look how well he did in his first year. He got votes for the rookie. He absolutely made the right decision. Blackwell, you got to think that he's going to make much more money at Duke. He needs to boost his draft stock. Next year, he would have the opportunity of being perhaps the leading scorer on a national championship contender, and also go into a more weakened draft and have opportunities to work a little bit as a primary ball handler. So it's just, it made total sense why Coward did what he did. You would have to think that all the logic would make sense for Blackwell to come back. But until that happens, as Duke fans, we stress a little bit about it. That's why I want those players to be in a different room. So I don't want to have to even think about it.
And now, as Duke fans, we kind of can fully watch from a basketball perspective. You're able to watch these NBA playoffs. There are only 4 teams remaining right now in the Western Conference Finals and the Eastern Conference Finals. Amazing game last night, going to double OT between the Spurs and the Thunder. Tonight, we'll see Game 1 get started between the Cavs and the Knicks. Jared McCain playing a larger role than I think some might have even thought down the playoff stretch here for OKC. You've got Mason Plumlee, who was on the San Antonio Spurs roster. He's not getting into games this time. Why do you need to check into a game when you've got Victor Wembanyama and all the size that's there in that San Antonio front court? But obviously would be excited if a championship is in Mason Plumlee's future. And then on the other side of things, Tyrese Proctor advances to the Eastern Conference Finals with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So going to be fun. 4 teams remaining, Jeff, to ultimately see who comes out as NBA champions this season.
Yeah, it's fun having so many Duke guys you can root for in the NBA. And we were texting about after that classic double overtime game. You know, the Thunder, part of the issues is for them is how much they struggle just offensively in shooting, especially in the first half. And one of the bright spots was McCain. He was 3 of 6 from the floor, hit the 3. He also he's really good on the fast break. He can really take and he had a fast break score as well. He can really take it coast to coast. It was fun too, JJ. Reggie Miller, who does such a good job on the broadcast, when McCain's shooting, he's like, look at that stroke. You know, that's really when Reggie Miller is complimenting your shooting form, that tells you something. So it's been really fun watching McCain have a pretty major role. He comes in and he hits shots for them. He gives the Thunder, that's such a loaded team, but he gives them a spark off the bench for sure.
Yeah, he does. I mean, it's been really fun to watch him kind of be that spark plug off the bench, and just the energy he plays with. All of his teammates absolutely love the guy. Yeah. We love supporting him. And of the guys kind of remaining that have brotherhood connections, he's the one that's making the biggest impact on the court. The other guys still kind of waiting for their opportunity and really buying in to the team concept that's there. All right, Jeff, we've reached the end of the show here today, man. Always good to see you and talk about all the latest news going on with Duke Hoops. Tell me about all your work and how people can best support you.
Yeah, JJ, thank you for giving me this platform. At Forbes.com, I kind of write about the intersection of sports and business, and that's why Duke comes up as the ultimate brand. I just wrote about Travis Kelce's partnership with Tommy Hilfiger. Next week, there's a big fundraiser in Kansas City. The Kansas City area has a lot of notable Chiefs fans of Paul Rudd, Eric Stonestreet, Jason Sudeikis, and they have a big fundraiser that I'm going to be covering and reporting on, and that should be fun too. And you can find all my work on Forbes.com and search my name, Jeff Fedotin, Fedotin.
We'll see you again soon, Jeff.
Always a pleasure, man.
All right, Jeff Fedotin. Follow him on X at @JFedotin. Guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Always appreciate your support here within our program. Be sure to follow us for free wherever it is that you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. You can follow us on X at @LO_Blue Devils. I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. And then take a moment and be sure to subscribe to us for free on YouTube. Go find our YouTube channel, run it up. And if you're watching us currently on YouTube, thank you so much for your support as always. That'll do it for today's show. Go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.